The Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. It is no secret that Metro Detroit is old. Many of the homes we live in, the streets we drive on, and the drainage systems we use were constructed decades ago. And it's mostly gray, meaning they're made of concrete, steel, and asphalt. That material is sturdy, yes, but it's less helpful for navigating extreme weather, especially flooding. The good news is that across Metro Detroit, green infrastructure projects are cropping up. What do those look like? Why do they matter? And how can more residents create green infrastructure projects to prevent flooding and beautify their communities? We're thinking about this in the face of a multi-day flood watch, and we have someone here with some answers. Jim Nash is the Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner. Commissioner Nash, welcome to the Metro.
Happy to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Before we get into green infrastructure projects, I want to again acknowledge almost all of Michigan is in a flood watch through tonight. How concerned are you about flooding right now?
Well, this is significant. And, you know, part of the thing is that we've had so much rain lately that the ground is completely saturated. In normal conditions, you have a rain and at least the first part of the rain is absorbed into the ground. One of the things of civilization is we have impervious surfaces, roofs, driveways, parking lots, sidewalks, roads. All of those immediately shed water. Nature absorbs water. So it takes a lot of water before nature has enough to absorb because the roots in nature are longer than grass, like in your front yard. But when we have all these impervious surfaces, it just sheds and it goes right to the storm drains. Those storm drains are not treated and anything in any way. They go directly into the nearest lake, river, or stream and deposit that. Whatever comes off those roads is pollution. That's part of the reason that we want to have green infrastructure. Green infrastructure mimics nature. So we're putting in things in nature, rain gardens that can absorb way more water in a rainstorm than grass can. So that's one of the things that we are really working on as a region, as a state. We're seeing the whole Great Lakes region is seeing more flooding, more extreme weather because climate change is happening.
That's right. Climate change is intensifying these weather events, and it's one extreme to the other, depending on what part of the country or the world that you're in. Before we get into more of what it looks like to become more proactive rather than reactive to what's happening right now, I do want to ground us still in this very present moment. So you're saying that the ground is saturated. There's nowhere for the water to go. What kind of damages are you anticipating for people in Metro Detroit right now due to the flooding that has happened or is likely to happen?
Well, so far we've not seen any sewer backups. The city of Detroit and a few of the suburbs have combined sewer systems. So the rainwater mixes with the sanitary sewage that's already in the pipes. And that's the thing we don't want seeing going into people's basements. So we have not seen that so far. More overland flooding and the flooding of rivers just growing out of their banks. That's what we're seeing right now. So if you're a riparian homeowner, if your home is on a lake, river, or stream, then that's what's going to be threatening your yard. If you're too close to it, it could threaten your foundation. That's the kind of things that we're seeing right now. We haven't seen the overland flooding to that much of an extent yet. But again, if we keep seeing this rain, it's going to get to that, and especially the harder rains. That's what's going to produce that more flooding conditions.
Okay, so now we have set the scene here. It is a very wet one. Now I want to talk about some examples, and I want to start kind of simple that people can take on right now in terms of protecting themselves, protecting their homes. And I also want us to look at things that are economical and where people can lean on, let's say, cities and counties for some assistance. So talk about what's out there for folks.
So every community has permits for stormwater retention. We all have, Oakland County does, we have an ordinance that explains to communities how to do that. There's a lot of work that goes into planning for these kind of things. For individuals, if you've ever had a history of basement flooding, consider putting in a backflow preventer. That's something that actually is basically just a flap that flaps down when sewage is coming from the opposite direction, from the sewer into your home. It flaps down, and then you won't have that kind of thing happen. That's more common in low elevation homes. If you're up on a hill, you're not going to have that much of a problem like that. So homes that are low tend to have a history of that kind of thing. So people are more aware of that. Make sure you keep your valuables out of your basement. You don't want to have a lot of furniture in your basement if there's any history of that.
This is such a bummer because a basement is thought to be like this extra living space, this extra storage space. And it's starting to feel like in Michigan and certainly surrounding areas, it's perhaps better if you don't have one. Is that?
Well, I'm on a slab and partially on a crawl space, and I don't have those problems. But yeah, I understand that. Again, the weather we're seeing more extreme weather than we used to see. When these systems were built, we didn't have these kind of 3-5 inch rains suddenly that we've experienced in Michigan in more recent years. So we're getting used to that. As you mentioned earlier, we have very old infrastructure in many of our communities. We are in the process of replacing that, which is a significant expense, but we're also trying to make some of them bigger so they can take more of this before it comes into places. With green infrastructure, we're trying to complement the gray infrastructure we have and hopefully over time replace less gray infrastructure and use more green infrastructure. What we're trying to do is just make the water stay on the ground. It can pool for a short while, but as long as it's gone within the first 24 hours, you won't have mosquito issues, but that'll get rid of that storm before it goes into the storm drains. And that's what has the potential for flooding people's basements is too much stormwater in the drain.
I derailed you there, Jim Nash. I apologize for that. I want to take you back to the examples of green infrastructure that people could be building and creating and adding to their homes right now. And we're talking like the most accessible options.
Simple things like rain barrels off your downspouts from your roof. They'll collect the first 50 gallons or so, and then you can use it to water your lawn, any flowers you have, and use that. So rain barrels are very effective. I have a couple of them.
A barrel I would take down Niagara Falls.
Well, a 55-gallon drum, basically. You can get them, used ones. Then you can buy them in a lot of places now, even like, English gardens and nature stores will have them. They're reasonably priced, anywhere from $65 to $100, depending on how big and how much, how fancy you want it. Rain gardens, where what you're doing is you're taking out a piece of your lawn that grass, when you mow your lawn, the roots are about 2 inches deep. So whatever water that gets on the ground and follows those roots can only go an inch or two. When you put a rain garden in, if you use native plants, they can have roots 10, 15, 20 feet deep. And all that water is pulled down by those roots. And you use better soils that are more accepting of rainwater. And they're, again, fairly simple. I put in a couple along my drain, and that means not nearly as much water is getting to the street as used to. It's allowed to pull into this system. So even trees, there's some trees more than others, but trees pull out a staggering amount of water out of the ground and then evaporate it into the air. So
what's the best tree to do that?
Well, again, I have a website, oakgov.com, called oakgov.com/RainSmart. And RainSmart lists all the native plants for Michigan and even Oakland and Wayne counties that have the best capture of rainwater, whether that be flowers and plants in a rain garden or trees. So even bushes. So all those have facts. It's much easier to find native plants now than it was even 5 years ago. Many nurseries carry them that didn't used to. So you just ask where your native plants are. And again, once you plant them, they can grow very deep roots. They tend to be perennials, so they'll last year after year. And it's been very successful on my property, all those things. So you can do it.
RainSmart. Say the website again.
oakgov.com/rainsmart. That's our website. We have a program called the RainSmart rebate program. We can give up to $2,000 rebates to homeowners to put them on their residential properties.
How many people are using that program in Oakland County?
Well, we've had it for 2 years as a pilot. We're looking for a grant from the federal government right now, and they've already approved our work plan. So I think we served about 190 projects in the first time around, and it was about 6 million gallons of water saved from the system per year for that. We're hoping to extend this. A lot of communities are doing this on their own properties, and they're using ordinances to make commercial properties do it. But there hasn't been much in the residential area, and that's what we're trying to teach people, that they can help flooding by doing this. Plus, it brings in pollinators and birds and other wildlife that brings more nature into your communities.
So there are widespread benefits then to
Absolutely.
doing this work. You're not just doing this to protect yourself. You're strengthening ecosystems. You are beautifying your community.
Little
You're
gardens
being a good
everywhere.
neighbor.
That's right. Little gardens everywhere. People love that. We have a connection to nature that's subconscious, and we love seeing that.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is Jim Nash. He's the Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner. We're discussing the flooding people are experiencing right now or are worried about experiencing, and the green infrastructure projects that are working to combat that flooding. I do want to talk about how your role has changed and perhaps how it has become more relevant, not to diminish what you've always been doing, but the fact that now things feel a lot more pressing. But before we do that, I do want to look at another really interesting project and kind of celebrate that for a moment, if you will. It's the Norton Street Innovation Project. It's designed to manage almost 1 million gallons of stormwater in Pontiac. It has plants and trees and a creek that redirects stormwater. How does it work?
Well, again, this is a larger scale green infrastructure. It's about, I want to say, 1,100 feet long. It's as part of a neighborhood where on one side are houses and on the other side is a drain that we already use. And we decided that this would be a good chance for to demonstrate a green infrastructure program. And that is, again, we put in trails through it. We put in little rain gardens, bioswales all over. A bioswale is when the water it's going downhill and it can go into a depression and fill that up and then infiltrate into the ground before it gets to the rain, the storm drain. All these kind of things are very helpful for a neighborhood. Again, they'll have flowers in their neighborhood for a long way that are fairly easy to maintain. Way more efficient than maintaining gray infrastructure, which is very expensive because it's all underground. So this is something that helps do that work of containing stormwater without the huge expense of the gray infrastructure that has been the tradition for the history of this kind of system.
I mean, let's think about 10 to 15 years ago when we would say the words green and gray infrastructure. People would glaze over. They'd say, what is that? I don't even really care to understand. Okay, you're talking about cement and pavement versus lots of plants and foliage. Now that folks are feeling this pressure, in other words, my property is going to potentially be ruined. My health is at risk. I wonder how much more you are seeing an appetite and a desire to be part of these green projects, green infrastructure projects from, just like local residents or more broadly from the government. I mean, you said that you were just approved preliminarily from the federal government for one of your latest projects.
Right. Grants are always a process, especially when you're dealing with the federal government, which is, farther away and more complex than the state government. But yeah, we work with them on a wide variety of things. Michigan is one of two states, us and New Jersey, where the state actually enforces federal environmental law. All the other states, you have to deal directly with the EPA. So we deal with state environmental, and that's It's much more closer to home. We have a great relationship with them, and we're really working hard. So we work with all these communities, and all the communities recognize that. We had a giant flood in 2014. And 18,000 homes had back up into their basements, just in Oakland County. Another, I think, 15,000 in Macomb County. And when that happens to you, that's something you never forget. And you will always think about how am I affected by that next storm? People worry about that. So yeah, when we're trying to offer them understanding of how we can deal with this better, make sure the overland flooding is taken care of, the rivers rising taken care of, and our job is to make sure that the sewer systems don't back up into homes. And again, if you have a backflow preventer, if you put green infrastructure around your home, the less gets into the system that then can back up into your home. So all those things are answers that people recognize. You mentioned when I've been doing this for 25 years almost. I talk to folks, and when I talked to them 20 years ago, nobody knew what that was. I talk to people nowadays. Almost everybody in the room has heard about it. I ask, have you ever heard of green infrastructure? And most people raise their hands now. So they have heard about that. Especially in Michigan. I've lived around the country, and Michigan people understand that we have to care for water. I just deal with that a lot, and most people, conservative, liberal, they understand we have to protect our water. So that's not a hard sell in most places, that we do these things to protect you and the nature that we depend on. If we don't have that, we're in trouble. So all of this is helping protect the average citizen, and I think most people recognize that.
I'm wondering, with all these years under your belt doing this work, Commissioner Nash, how you have watched this work change for you, and does it feel more mission-driven now? Does it feel?
I think so.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we talked to, again, EPA. We talked to the Army Corps of Engineers. That's one of the big things that does civil engineering in the whole country. The Army Corps of Engineers now, they have a whole branch on nature-based solutions, which is green infrastructure. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't a thing at the federal level. So now the feds are really understanding that this is something that helps, and that they're working with us to do. And so the more people understand this, the more help we're getting, and hopefully we'll keep getting that. Where there is issues with both staffing at the EPA and grants, how they're treated nowadays, but hopefully we'll keep going, and I know the state is heavily invested in this now.
Well, in the absence of federal regulations and the rollback of regulations, is that also making you feel like your job is that much more important right now?
Yeah, again, Michigan being one of those states that gets to do our own environmental regulation, things like, the Supreme Court made it much harder to protect wetlands. But Michigan has separate laws on wetlands, so we are in much better shape for wetlands. And again, wetlands are the kidneys of our systems. They clean out all the stormwater before it gets to our lakes, rivers, and streams.
I bet you love saying that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There you go. No, it shows what the function is. It's, without kidneys, people die. And without wetlands, lakes can die, eutrophies. And then that's something that we, again, lake people who live on lakes, their property values are high. And if we have algae blooms, if we have closed beaches, that affects their property values along with everything else it affects.
So you're saying overall, you're hopeful because Michigan has this more independent role in how it can react, but not only how it can react, how it can be proactive in dealing with the water issues that we're facing, namely flooding. What about dealing with or working more closely with some of these other folks in different counties who are doing the same job as you? I mean, I'm wondering why you all aren't banding together, because these water issues, they know no boundaries.
Well, okay, we do that. We worked with, we started in 2019, and it took 5 years to work with Eagle, and Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, and Livingston counties. We all got together and decided that we could do a regional stormwater ordinance. Everybody has to have a stormwater ordinance. And we decided that normally Eagle had always, everybody was a silo. Each county was its own silo. So we said we can work together, develop one that we can all live under. And that way we're not competing against each other. We're competing with everybody else because we're all on that same playing field. So we did that over about 5 years. It took a while to convince Eagle that this was the best way to approach it. But now they understand that. And I think other people are doing this too, because once they've understood that, we can do it much more efficiently as a region than as individuals.
Okay, so you are a proponent for regionalism, for working together and building these coalitions to do stronger work. In the last 30 seconds that we have here, I want to take things back to a practical place. If you're in Metro Detroit and you're listening to this right now and you're dealing with a flooding issue on your street, what should you do to include your neighbors in a green infrastructure project on your block, as briefly as you can?
Well, work with your homeowners association. If there's one of those, any way you can get together some people to do it, the more people, the better it is, because you have your own labor to do it with, so you're not costing a lot of money. Plants are not very expensive, and as long as you're planting them and watering them and keeping them safe, those kind of things really help a neighborhood control their flooding because it keeps that water from getting into the storm drains.
Jim Nash, Oakland County Water Resources Commissioner, thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks for having me.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Coming up, we live in a time where it's really hard for people to relate to those they disagree with. People practicing interfaith dialogue believe they can change that. We'll learn more next, right here on the Metro. Stay with us.